Warning: the cheapest rent in America can cost you your safety. Some cities look affordable, until you see the crime, the decay, and what families deal with every day. Here are 10 US cities where low rent hides a much darker reality, and the worst one might shock you. Stockton declared bankruptcy in 2012. That history still shows up in city services and public safety. Crime rates remain well above national averages, and pockets of violent crime persist in neighborhoods that were once middle class. People move for lower rents, but find their safety and basic services compromised. Unemployment, underemployment, fewer jobs, less commerce, neglected properties, fewer resources for policing and infrastructure. The downtown revitalization projects exist, but they're unevenly distributed and often don't reach the neighborhoods people can actually afford. That makes everyday life unpredictable. Foreclosures, vacant homes contributing to opportunistic crime, and a sense of decline. Small business investment is tentative. Many entrepreneurs hesitate to open shops if foot traffic is unreliable. For families, schools and extracurricular options can be inconsistent. I met a local teacher who said she loves Stockton but worries about the kids she teaches some walk-long routes because bus service is weak. She emphasized that a low rent check doesn't cover the emotional and safety costs families absorb every day. That anecdote stuck with me. Stockton's numbers might lure you in, but the city's systemic economic wounds turn affordability into a risky bargain, you know. Flint's water crisis became a national scandal. The ripple effects are still very real. Lead contamination and long-term public health concerns didn't vanish with headlines. They changed community trust and damaged infrastructure for years. Detroit has one of the most dramatic population declines in U.S. history. At its peak it had 1.85 million residents. Now it's under 700,000. That translates into entire neighborhoods with vacant houses and empty lots, making crime and blight persistent problems in many areas. The vacancy rate impacts safety and city services across neighborhoods. Economic recovery in Detroit is uneven. Some neighborhoods have booming redevelopment and tech corridors, while many working-class areas still face disinvestment. Job opportunities exist, but they're often concentrated in certain pockets, leaving long commutes and limited choices for those seeking cheap housing near work. Public safety stats show elevated violent crime in specific neighborhoods, and the strain on policing resources can mean longer response times in distressed areas. That unpredictability undermines the appeal of low rents if your daily life is punctuated by safety concerns. I met a small business owner who invested in a storefront downtown and sees growth, but he warned me about outlying blocks that feel abandoned after dark. His point was simple: affordability without reliable safety and services does not equal quality of life. Detroit's comeback narrative is inspiring, but the reality for many is that cheap housing exists alongside serious safety and economic trade-offs. Chapter 4. Cleveland's health and economic stats paint a mixed picture. Higher rates of certain health problems, pockets of persistent poverty despite cultural attractions downtown. Low housing costs can hide underfunded schools, strained public health resources that affect families day to day. Don't mistake a bargain for a better life. The job market has improved in certain sectors, but wages and opportunities are unevenly distributed. Neighborhoods near medical centers and downtown see investment. Vacancy property neglect limited retail options. Those differences matter for daily convenience and long-term stability. Safety varies block by block. Some neighborhoods are lively and safe. Others see higher crime rates. Transit gaps slower. Municipal improvements can make commuting and access to services tougher for residents who can't afford cars. That eats into any rent savings if getting to work or school is difficult. I spoke to a resident who loves Cleveland's art scene but said his cousin moved away because the local school options didn't match their expectations. He made a simple point: you can love a city and still know it's not the best move for your family. Summary: Cleveland's low cost of living isn't a free pass. Hidden social and public health costs can turn savings into setbacks. So be careful. Chapter 5. St. Louis often ranks among cities with high per capita violent crime, and that statistic is more than a number. It shapes everyday life in neighborhoods with persistent risk. Certain zip codes experience concentrated violence, schools, businesses, and resident mobility. Cheap rent in these areas often means a daily trade-off with safety. The economic picture is similar. Some neighborhoods are stabilizing through targeted investment, while others continue to struggle with unemployment and lack of infrastructure. Public services can be stretched thin and local nonprofits do heroic work, but gaps remain widespread. Those gaps affect who feels safe. walking streets after dark neighborhood risk matters, proximity to amenities, school quality and reliable transit. That patchwork means you could get a great price but a poor quality of life if your neighborhood is isolated or unsafe. Always check micro-level data, not just citywide averages. I met a community organizer who described late-night patrols and neighborhood watches that sprang up because people felt they had to protect their streets themselves. That's admirable, but it's also a sign that cheap rent can come with a heavy personal cost. Summary: St. Louis can offer affordability, but violent crime and systemic inequality make low rent a risky trade-off for many. So consider the real costs. Chapter 6. Baltimore faces a brutal opioid epidemic. And crime issues that have strained health systems and social safety nets. Certain neighborhoods, hit hardest by addiction and economic decline, show elevated rates of violent crime and property crimes. Low rent often correlates with higher exposure to these systemic problems. Economic recovery efforts and community interventions exist, but they're battling decades of disinvestment. Public health infrastructure must respond to addiction, mental health, and poverty simultaneously, which is a tall order. For someone moving in to save on rent, those hidden burdens can become personal burdens fast. The city's cultural and historical assets are real, but quality of life depends on neighborhood choice. Investing time to understand local resources, treatment centers, school quality, and police engagement is essential before assuming affordability equals living well. Otherwise, you may be buying a problem you didn't sign up for. I heard from a nurse working in an inner-city clinic who said many patients face overlapping crises that reduce their ability to work or participate in schooling. Her message: cheap rent is not the same as a stable home environment. Summary: Baltimore's affordability comes with layered public health and safety challenges that can outweigh initial savings. So do your homework. Chapter 7. New Orleans is resilient and culturally rich, but, it also faces persistent flooding, aging infrastructure, and pockets of violent crime. Hurricanes and heavy rains expose the limits of aging drainage and levee systems, and that vulnerability affects housing safety and insurance costs. Cheap rent near at-risk areas can become expensive fast after a storm. Chapter 8. Memphis reports higher than average rates for violent crime in some neighborhoods, and public safety statistics consistently raise red flags for prospective residents. Economic advantages in tourism and hospitality are offset by cyclical employment and low wages in those sectors. When disasters hit, the most affordable neighborhoods often suffer the longest recovery timelines. That means affordability can evaporate in the wake of flooding, mold, or property damage. Crime, especially in certain neighborhoods, remains a concern and can affect public perception and daily life. Combine that with disaster risk and inconsistent service recovery, and the cheap label loses its charm pretty quickly. Assess both disaster risk and neighborhood safety before committing to a move. I spoke with a resident who rebuilt twice after storms and said she wouldn't move into flood-prone, cheaper parts of town again, even if the rent was low. Her lived experience underscored how affordability without resilience is fragile. Summary: New Orleans offers incredible culture, but affordability there must be weighed against environmental and safety vulnerabilities. Affordable neighborhoods are often the same ones dealing with long-term economic struggles, which complicates the true cost of moving there. The job market has strong clusters, logistics, healthcare, but many residents still face underemployment and limited upward mobility. Public services in struggling neighborhoods can lag, from transit reliability to school funding, affecting family life and career prospects over time. Chapter 9. Camden has one of the highest poverty rates in the region and has struggled with violent crime and infrastructure decay for decades. While redevelopment efforts exist near the waterfront and health campuses, many residential neighborhoods face persistent challenges that cheap rent doesn't fix. Poor housing stock, unreliable transit-limited municipal services combine with limited job opportunities to create a tough environment for residents trying to build stability. Affordability often equates to exposure to those systemic deficits. Public safety has been a focal point for reform. Community police initiatives have had successes, but outcomes are uneven. Families moving in for cheap housing may find that schools' local resources are stretched thin, affecting children's long-term prospects. I spoke to a community health worker who emphasized that affordability must be paired with opportunity. Otherwise, families get trapped in cycles that are hard to escape. That was a sobering reminder of what rent savings can hide. Summary: Camden's low costs come with deep-rooted social and infrastructural issues that make affordability a poor bargain for many. Chapter 10. Birmingham shows troubling employment and health metrics in certain neighborhoods, and educational outcomes vary widely across the city. Low-cost housing is real, but it often sits alongside underfunded schools and limited job pipelines for young adults, which impacts long-term earning potential and quality of life. Safety concerns persist in specific areas, with violent crime and property crime rates elevated compared to safer suburbs. Access to healthcare and mental health services is improving, but still uneven, meaning residents in cheaper neighborhoods may face barriers when they need care. Economic revitalization is underway in parts of Birmingham, particularly downtown and certain commercial corridors, but that progress hasn't reached every neighborhood. If you're moving for affordability, you could end up far from jobs, transit, and services, negating any rent advantage. I met a recent transplant who chose a cheap apartment but now spends hours commuting, and misses after-school programs for his kids. He told me the savings on rent evaporated when he factored in time, transport, and missed opportunities. Summary: Birmingham's affordability comes with trade-offs in education, employment, and safety that make cheap rent a risky shortcut. Outro: I've walked through 10 cities where affordability hides hard truths: public health risks, crime failing infrastructure, limited job prospects. If you're thinking about moving for cheap rent, don't just look at the price tag. Map out schools, healthcare access, commute times, neighborhood safety. These factors add up faster than rent savings. My number one city on this list might surprise you because it's not just the statistics, it's the lived experience of locals who weigh safety, stability, and opportunity every day. I want you to move smart, not just cheap. Do your homework, visit at different times, talk to residents, and consider long-term costs before signing a lease. If you found this helpful, share it. Curio Buzz, stay safe, be smart, and remember, the cheapest option can end up being the most expensive. Subscribe us.